I have now the great pleasure to introduce Stefan Oerli to you. Stefan works at Trivadis as a platform architect and is responsible for the security solution area of the company. And he is an Oracle ace, by the way. He will speak about Oracle Unified Audit for multi-tenant databases. Welcome, Stefan. We are very glad to have you here.
Yeah, welcome from my side. I just jump into the presentation. Yeah, I'm going to speak about Oracle Unified Directory and with the focus on multi-tenant databases. Before I start, I have a few slides about me. Most of the stuff has been said. You can read this later on as a reference if you don't know me yet. And also the company, Trivadis company, as a platinum sponsor should be known in the SOOP. So these 3 slides are mainly as reference for the slides you can download later on. I have the following agenda for my speak. I'm gonna give you a short introduction about Unified Directory. Sorry, I'm a bit confused. Not about Unified Directory. I'm gonna speak about Oracle Unified Audit. A bit mismatched with the terms. Then we're gonna discuss what's special with multi-tenant databases. I will raise a discussion about common and local policies, in particular because my first intention when I work with Unified Audit on multi-tenant databases, I misunderstand the concept of common audit policies. I think it's quite important to see what's the idea behind of this. Then I will discuss a few challenges and best practice. And we also have a look into the latest enhancements which are implemented in 19C and which are already visible in the 20C preview. And I will end up my presentation with a short summary. Yeah, let's start with the Unified Audit. I think I'm going to have a few problems to distinguish Unified Audit and Unified Directory since I do quite a lot of work with Unified Directory recently. So excuse me, the presentation is the whole day or the whole 45 minutes about Unified Auditing. Sorry about that. Yeah, the feature has been introduced in Oracle 12. It was the idea to introduce a new fast audit engine. That was one thing. And the other thing was to have one single view for all audit data. So in the old days with the traditional auditing, I had different audit trails for fine-grained audit, for database vault, for standard audit, and for SysDBA audit, and so on. And the Unified Audit brings in one audit trail for all together so that they have one location. And it is also always activated, so it is enabled by relinking the binary. I cannot switch it off without shutting down and relinking the binary. Over time, Oracle has improved Unified Auditing a bit. And particularly, there was a major change with 12.2. The first release was not that fast, so it should be a fast audit engine, but there were a few issues. As you can see in the graphic on the right side, we have the classical Unified Audit as it has been implemented with 12.1. We had a SGI queue, the possibility to have immediate write, queued write to the center read-only Unified Audit trail. Oracle changed this. The SKA queue, which used to be customizable by the DBA, has been removed, and also the queue modes has been removed, and the base table has been redesigned to a conventional base table. So there's no buffer anymore. Besides this, there were ongoing enhancements in 18, 19, and 20C. And as of now, 20C, the traditional audit is officially deprecated. So as of 20C, the way to go is a unified audit. So that's the important point. I have here a bit an overview about what do we have, what kind of audit possibilities we have currently still in each database. It is more or less a graphic where you see all the different audit facilities. So we have on the left side the red circle, red ellipse, the topic audit. We have a trigger-based audit and the database vault audit. So the trigger-based audit is something which can be done by the customer. It can always be done by the customer with a log-on trigger, with a before update trigger, or whatever you want. The database vault auditing is part of database vault itself. It used to be configured within database vault, and it used to go to a dedicated location. Then we have the green part, which is called traditional auditing. We distinguish this between privileged user auditing. That means that when I audit the SysDBA or SysOper or SysBackup user, there I always have a part mandatory audit, so I cannot disable within a database that a connect or a startup of a database is audited. This will always create audit entries, and in the traditional audit, this will create this minor small .out files in the audit dump destination. Yeah, besides this, I also have the standard auditing where I can configure different audit trails, DB, OS, and so on, and then fine-grained audit on top. And now the light red part, the unified audit, is the important part which I'm going to speak now. I add on the right side a few configuration parameters for unified audit. It hasn't been, these three haven't been available as of 12.1. They have been introduced in the newer releases, 18.19, especially the possibility to use again a syslog to write unified audit trails. With Oracle 12, 12.1, 12.2, 18.19, the default is that the unified audit goes to this unified audit trail within the database. You're going to see how this is implemented in a multi-tenant environment on the next slides. And this red parameter, which are in the parameter, I can also specify how the unified audit should go to syslog. And there is one which can be enabled on PDB level, and a new one which can be enabled on CDB level as well. So that's for the traditional audit. Then a few other points. Unified audit, as I mentioned, I use it for different database feature. So everything like Arman, Oracle Label Security, and everything goes to this one unified audit trail. This unified audit trail is stored in a base table, and this is by default in SysArcs. Or if I move it away in a custom table space. So it's best practice that we say, oh, we don't keep it in SysArcs, we define a dedicated table space and move it away to don't blow up the SysArcs table space with audit data. The unified audit itself is work policy based. So compared to the traditional audit, in the traditional audit, I had to explicitly say what kind of action and object and privilege I want to audit. So I really had to individually set it by hand, if you like. And now with a unified audit, I have the possibility to define audit policy. And these audit policies are some kind of containers for audit settings. I can use them for different action, privilege, objects. I can also use system-wide and events or object-specific audit option. It can contain roles. So instead of defining all system privilege, I can take a role and say, yeah, please audit everything which is in this role. Yeah, and then as soon as I have defined them, I can activate or deactivate them. So as long as they are not activated, they are not used. So this means Also in the multi-tenant environment, I can define tons of audit policies. As long as they are not activated, they are not used and they don't impact my system. Yeah, Oracle itself does provide a couple of default policies. We will come to them a bit later, more in detail. By default, there are a few things like that Oracle by default is auditing some security-related change. So the audit trail itself is always monitored. Also in Eudora parameter can be monitored, log on, log off, these kind of things. Over time, Oracle has enhanced the features. So with the latest releases, I have the possibility to export audit data using Data Pump. I can export it on a PDB, and I can import the unified audit data in another database. I do have a central view of my audit data, so I can access a CDB and I can see all my audit data. But we will come to this topic a bit later. And we have, since Oracle 18, also the possibility to use again Syslog for audit trail. And in a multi-tenant environment, this feature could make sense depending on how you're going to use your multi-tenant environment. Besides this, Oracle offers a PLS code package to do administration and housekeeping, to define purge job, maintenance job on the audit trails, and also to import of the binary files, which are available as well. But also to this, we will come on the next slide. Here, just an example. I create an audit policy called TVD DBA role, DBA contain role. I can enable this audit policy, and then I can check my audit enable policy that this audit policy has been enabled for all users. So every user which used the DBA role or the features within the DBA role will be audited, just as an example, a simple example. Then some things which are important to know when we speak about unified audit, in particular also when in combination with PDB. Unified audit itself is not immune against bugs. So early releases did really have some nasty bugs which cause operation impact, like the purging was not working correctly based on the timestamp and these kind of things. But all these bugs get quite fast fixed, and Oracle itself has, with the reorganization in 12.2, done quite a good job to enhance performance, to improve unified audit, and I see that we are on a good track, and there are a lot of things are fixed. Nevertheless, there are still a few things which we have to consider. We will discuss them later. Then something else which is just logical to me. So a unified audit trail is a read-only table, but to be honest, it is not immune or it's not immortal. So as long as the audit records remains within a database, there is a risk that somebody can manipulate or tamper them. So that's just a matter of fact, and that's always the case if I have audit data and if I keep the audit data on the system which I audit, there's a risk that somebody can manipulate it. Just for you as a hint, guess how Oracle does handle this? They have a read-only table which they can write data into it. So that's quite visually that there is a functionality that Oracle can write it, and if somebody takes, somebody takes out or does days, weeks, or hours of re-engineering, you will find a way to bypass or to use a similar method to update this table. And also something which is important, and it's really more important in multi-tenant environments, you need a proper audit concept before you start unified audit. Because if you start to think, oh, I would like to audit select, the biggest problem you can have is that you also get all the selects you want to audit. And just as an example, if you say, yeah, I want to have all the selects or I want to have all the deletes on the table, and your colleague is doing some work, some cleanups, and he decides to don't do a bulk delete, he does an individual delete of each row, you will end up with an audit record for this particular delete for each row. And if the colleague is deleting 1 million rows, you will have 1 million delete records within your audit trail. So it's really important that you think about what you want to have and how you're going to use your environment. And it is more complex on the environment, on a multi-tenant environment, but we see them as well. Yeah, and I mentioned already the reorganization, the performance impact on the earlier release, which has been fixed within 12.2. It is just one thing that if you are using 12.1 and you migrate to 12.2, 18, 19, it is quite important to know that if you already had audit data, that you have to migrate and transfer the 12.1 audit data with the DBMS audit management package with the procedure transfer unified audit records. To sum up the introduction and the general information about the unified audit, yeah, when it came out, I said, start using unified audit because it's really nice and simple with the audit possibilities and the audit policies. But now, with what I know right now is that I recommend that you don't use or don't start with unified audit in 12C release 1. So just go ahead, start using latest release 18, 19, or even 12.2, and start using unified audit at these releases. It saves life, or it saves your nerves, and it's much easier and much better, more performance. So what about multi-tenant databases? The thing is with the multi-tenant databases, if I have 2 PDB and a CDB, I have 3 audit environments and 3 audit settings. And that's the most thing, or the most important thing, or the most critical thing. This means that there is no consolidation, that I have one audit trail which I can use for my whole CDB. The audit records which are related to one PDB, like PD1, they will always be part of PDB1. So there is no audit record within the root DB about an audit entry which has been about an audit event which happens within PDB1. This is important to know, and this has an impact on how I'm going to set it up and how I'm going to configure the whole stuff. Because it means that I mentioned before, create a separate table space for each, for the audit trail, for the unified audit trail. This means if I have 200 PDBs, I have to create 200 table spaces, and I have to move 200 unified audit trails to the new table space. You can simplify this in terms, in the way how you're going to set up your PDBs, that you have a seed database which you adapt accordingly, or you can clone the PDBs with prepared configuration and so on. So you can simplify this, but you have to be aware that you have an individual unified audit configuration for each PDB, and that's the important part. There is one special one. I mentioned this in the gray box below. There is the Oracle Base audit folder. This is a hard-coded folder, so you cannot customize it with the initORA parameter. Oracle is using Oracle Base audit for the audit binary files. The audit binary files are the audit events which happens when the database is not yet open. So if you have a read-only database, or if you have a mountain database, or if you start up the database, there will be an audit record, and this audit record is not written to the table because there is not yet a table available. So Oracle writes this information in this binary files. And this is one location for the whole environment. So below audit, you have then the DB unique name and the PDB name. So there's different folders for the different PDBs. You can load this data then into your PDB or into the CDB. So you can import it, and then you have it as well within the database. or you can purge it and do whatever you want and keep it as long as you want. Maintenance is also done with the DBMS Audit Management PLSQL package. Yeah, it's more or less what I mentioned already. So I have a dedicated audit trails per PDBs, and this implies that I have a distribution of relevant audit information. So there's no unified audit trail for the whole CDB, and this has increased administration effort, like housekeeping. And then we have a few challenges in terms of the local, in terms of the term local and common. I will discuss this a bit later. It's quite important that we understand the difference between these two names in terms of what it means for unified audit. On the other side, Oracle has introduced a couple of common views and package, like the CDB views for unified audit. You have these views in all databases, in all PDBs. In a PDB itself, you just see your own audit data, and in the CDB, you see the audit records from all PDB. But physically, the records will remain in each PDB. The DBMS Audit Management package can be used at the CDB level or in each PDB. Here you see a short a query. I'm connected to the CDB. I select CDB Unified Audit Trail, so the view which accesses the base table with all the audit information. And as you see, there is a column called ConID. Currently, I only have audit records from ConID 1, which is the root container. I just removed the lines just to have something visible. So we have just 3 lines within this view, but the important part is if I would see the different environments or the different records. This is one thing. I can short switch. I hope you see my screen. Just hold on. So I have here my database. Just do a select on my audit trail. And as you can see, there is plenty of information. So a bit smaller. As you see, you have plenty of information all in container, here in container 1, but there is also a few things in container 3, and yeah, here again in container 3. And if I go to the container 3, which is show PDBs, which is PD1, query again, then I only see the records from my environment itself. That's the important thing. Yeah, go back to the slide. Then I mentioned that DBMS Audit Management does also work with containers. We see here the package to create a purge job, and as you see highlighted in bold text, there is a parameter called container, and there you can choose either container equals current or all. What I do now here with the create purge job, I create a daily purge job, contain all. So this daily purge job will purge all audit records in all PDBs. So there's one purge job for all PDBs to purge the audit data. Sounds quite nice, but there are a few challenges with this setup. There are a few other things. we can define the unified audit policies with a create audit policy and then audit them. I can define them in the root container, and I can define them as well in each PDB. The effect of this is then I then create either common or local audit policy. But common has a special term, and I'm going to discuss this in the next chapter. I can also set a few initoro parameters, or a few, basically the two of them, the unified audit common system log or unified audit system log. The second one, unified audit system log, can be set on the root and on the PDB level. The idea is that the audit trail record will be forwarded to syslog, and the other one, the unified audit common syslog, can only be set on the root container. It has been introduced in 20C, and the idea of this is that the records for the common audit policy will be forwarded to syslog. I then also can define fine-grained audit policy on each PDB or in the root container. And as I mentioned with the example before, I can do the purge job either on the root or individual in each PDB. So that's the possibilities which I have. I mentioned a couple of times common and local policy. What happens there, or what's behind this? The thing is, when I create an audit policy with the statement mentioned here, create audit policy TVD, DBA role, DBA container all. This is one possibility, but I can also define it without specifying the container or specifying container current. Then I create the audit policy within the current container. Default is container current. I have a view, audit unified policies, with the attribute policy name and common. And common, it's an either yes or no, depending if it's a common policy or not. Now, the problem with common and not common. So I had the problem myself with the customer project, within the customer project, because we both thought, oh, cool, we're going to define a common audit policy. We have a few audit standards. We want to do auditing this and that. We do define it in the PDB, and then it's valid for all. So we define it in the CDB, and then it's valid for all PDBs. Great. No, that's not completely true. There is a minor thing, so a minor difference. If I create a common audit policy, I have to do this with the clause container all. This policy will be visible in all PDBs, so in the root container and in all PDBs. And the next bullet, that's the important part, this audit policy, when enabled, will only audit actions done by common user in this particular PDB. This means if I have a common policy doing a log on, log off auditing, and define this policy in a CDB, I audit with this every log on and log off of a common user in every PDB. But I do not audit log on, log offs in the PDBs of local user. And that's a bit the challenging part. Local policy, it's quite simple. I don't have to specify any special clause. Default is container current, and this CDB is then, this audit policy is then active in the PDB or in the CDB which I'm currently connected to, and only visible there and can only be activated there. So, and the important part is this local audit policy does then audit everything within this PDB, this particular PDB. So it doesn't matter if it's a local or a common user, it will then be audited. I'll make a short example to make this a bit visible. So I have here my database. Connect to the root container. We're gonna check what kind of policies we have enabled. So here I'm in the root container. We see these policies are enabled. I have a TVD log on, log off, and a TVD log on, log off local. If I do the same check within my PDB1, we set here the content to PDB1, the select, and I see I have my log on, log off local. Now, oops, I forgot to do a purge. I will come to this error later. So I do a connect now to my PDB1. I can copy all them together. So I did 3 connect. First, I connect to PDB1 as Scott Tiger, and then I did a connect as system manager, and the third connect is done as C # test manager as well. Connect again back as sysdba, and I do a select on my audit records, and now I see the different audit records which I have. I have my user, the Scott user. When the Scott user is connected, I see here the unified audit policy which has been used. It was the one, the TVD local, which has been used. Then I have the system connection, and then I see I have 2 audit policies which were active, the local one and the common one. And the same effects for the common user and also the sys user. So that's what I mean with this, with the difference. So if I have a common policy, it audit only common connects, and if I have a local one, it does audit both. That's the most important thing. There's one consequence. There's no possibility that I can enforce common audit setting to all PDBs for all users. So that's something which currently does not work. And something else is that common audit policy will be visible to each PDB. So if I define something in the CDB as common, then I will see them in all PDB. And if I define too much of them, I see quite a lot, and that's not really the problem. Defining too much. The problem is when I enable too much, then I have really quite some stuff. Yeah. On the other hand, it is highly recommended to have a proper user and role concept before starting to define the audit. So, do we have common user? Do we use common user? Should I audit them? What should I audit? So, this is quite important that I think about this beforehand. Yeah, then do we need common policies? If yes, how much? Which makes sense? Which one makes sense? Just as a small hint, all the Oracle default audit policies are defined as local policies. So these policies are always local in each PDB and in the CDB. So the Oracle does not provide default common policy for all things. Yeah, then we come to the channels and best practice, a few hints. One thing which is not available is that there is no common view to see what kind of audit policy I have enabled. So there is no view in the CDB where I can see, okay, I have this audit policies enabled. This information is only available within each PDB with this view called Audit Unified Enabled Policy. As I mentioned a couple of times, there is no possibility to enforce a common audit policy for all users across the PDBs. And one other thing is that there is an issue if I access the CDB. It's basically not an issue, it's just as it is designed. because the audit records are stored in each PDB, I have the challenge that if one PDB is not open, it's just in mount state, I don't see the information. So I can access the CDB Unified Audit Trail view in the root container, but there is no information for the PDB which is not running. And also, I don't see PDB is not running. You don't see all the information. So if I do a select there, I see what's open, or I see information of all open database. And this is how should I say? It is dangerous. You just have to make sure that you know what you access, so that you probably, if you have a process to check this, the Unified Audit Trail on the CDB, that you beforehand check if you have all PDB running. And if not, that you are aware of this and that you work around this if required. Then another, I would say, funny thing which you don't have when you have a single tenant database is when you use if you use different timestamps. So if you have a single tenant database or a classical database, you have one DB timestamp for the DB, and the audit trail column event timestamp does use timestamp with local time zone. That fits, that works perfect. But if you have a multi-tenant database and the PDBs do use different DB time zone, you could have funny results when you query the central CDB Unified Audit Trail. Because if you query CDB Unified Audit Trail, for the query, you will use the time zone defined in the CDB. And if you now have a PDB which has a complete different time zone, it can happen that you end up with audit events which are happening in the future, just because the PDB has a time zone which is ahead of the CDB time zone. And that's a bit weird. It has been changed in 19C, because the column event timestamp is now timestamp, not timestamp with local time zone. So this is fixed in 19C, and you can have whatever kind of time zones within your PDBs. You will always see the right views within your Unified Audit Trail. Housekeeping. This is something else. You have seen the error before when I did a purge on the audit trail. And that's a bit a downside. So if you can do the housekeeping on the CDB, and it's really practical, because you have one job which purges and do the cleanup, and it would be simple and easy. But the problem is this job checks if the container is running, and if it's not running, it does fail. The thing is, as you see, the error here is the error means like operation failed in one of the PDB because one of the PDB is down. That's okay. But the overall job has been failed, and it's a bit weird, because I mean, if you do it manually, then it's not a problem. You know, I have PDB 2, which is down, that's okay. But it's a bit problematic if you set up a regular scheduler job, because the scheduler job will always fail. Even if it was correct, it was running properly on the container, the root container on PDB1 in my example. It was just failing on PDB2. So overall it was okay. 2 of 3 were okay, and 1 were not okay. And now the problem is the schedule job, gives some errors. That's a bit, it's problematic. And if you want to work around this, the only workaround is that you have to purge the audit data within each PDB. Here you see the status of my PDB. I have my PDB seed, my root container, PDB1, which is open read write, and the PDB2, which was not opened, and therefore the job before was failing. Yeah. So the workaround is that if you have situation where you keep PDBs down for a longer time, then you have to set up the housekeeping individually in each PDB. If you say, no, that's not the case in our situation, our PDBs are always open, and if they are not open, they are, there is an issue, that's an incident, then you can use central housekeeping. But it depends on your use case.
5 minutes.
Yeah, I will. Thanks. I will come to the end with a list of couple of bugs. You have to be aware that there are a few things which you have to consider. I mean, the first one is fixed, that you can move it also, that you can move the whole data completely. The other things, there are points which I have discussed, like having some kind of common policy to enforce it for common and local user. It's an enhancement request ongoing. Same with the one which purging in a central container, that the error handling is done a bit nicer, I would say. Yeah. And also a few best practice. I mentioned them already. You have to define if you consolidate your databases on just internally, and then you can be quite strict on how to set up the auditing. But if you go the other way and say, no, I can set up some kind of private cloud, and my owner of the PDB have full control of their PDB, then you really have to think about how you're going to do the auditing. Because if they have full control, they can also purge and maintain the audit there. There is no possibility that you enforce from the CDB some audit rules which are valid, because they can change it on the PDB level. Yeah, and one best practice is that you consider to create only a minimal set of common audit policy and focus on local policy on the other hand. All the best practices move data away, but that's always the case. Consider housekeeping on PDB level due to the issues I mentioned before. And make sure that you check the PDBs. Enhancement, really speed up. That'll be on time. It's quite simple. 19C, I can start using top-level SQL statements. So instead of having all statements within a P&S code procedure, I can have the top-level execution statement done by the user and not all the details. So that simplify and reduce the amount of audit information. In proof of enhancement, I mentioned the one with the timestamp has been changed in 19C. And something has also changed. So PDB GUID has been added to the syslog event so that I can distinct the syslog audit records for each PDB. 19C enhancement are also quite interesting. There are a few new unified audit policies like sticker recommendation, top level action, and so on. And I can also do audit change immediately. So if I create a new audit policy, it has been become active immediately. Earlier release, the problem is that the user has to log off and log on again until he's using the new audit policy. And on production environment, it's quite helpful if I can apply this and have new audit actions available. Syslog, I mentioned this at the beginning. I have the possibility at top level to define a unified audit common syslog. The idea behind of this is that all the common audit policies will be forwarded to syslog, so that I have this example which I made before with the common audit logon policy. It will not go to the PDB itself, it will go to the syslog, which will then simplify the whole thing, that I have in my PDB only the audit record of my own auditing defined within the PDB. It makes sense for public and private cloud environment to use this kind of distinction. Then a new possibility to audit also HTTP, HTTPS protocols, especially for XMLDB, and I mentioned already deprecation of traditional auditing. So that's it, more or less. I would say, as a summary, unified auditing can really transparently be used in multi-tenant environments. There are a couple of bugs around over the life, but most of them are fixed quite within a meaningful time frame. It is just in combination with multi-tenant and different levels, and so that they can really make life a bit harder to identify, is it now a multi-tenant issue, or it is a audit issue, or where it is. So that's a bit more difficult to identify where the problem lies. Then it's really indispensable to have a clean audit concept before starting with auditing in a multi-tenant environment, in particular to have an idea what I want to do with common users and local users. Should I have common policies or no common policy? Yeah, and for my personal, I miss the possibility to have a common policy to enforce everything. Yeah, to have this kind of enforcement policy, to have one standard, and this is valid for all PDBs, for all users. Yeah, I see in the latest release, Oracle starts to enhance multi-tenant audit usability. It's going on. Quite a lot of things have been fixed. It's very welcome, but still a way to go. But I think this is also related to the situation that the new multi-tenant environment brings new use cases, new ways how we're going to use the whole environment, and that's why I think there will be still some things which can be enhanced and improved. So I thank you for the time. I think we're quite on time.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Does anybody has a question? I think we can take one question, and you can raise your hand with the symbol down on your screen, and we will give you the opportunity to talk. So, Reto, Matthias, can you give Reto the right to talk? Okay.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Thanks. My name is Reto. I'm from Post Finance in Bern, and I'm a DBA. My question is, when we enable the syslog feature, we are missing a lot of information in the syslog. Is there a possibility to define which files are written to the syslog?
Unfortunately, not. That's the downside of syslog, and it's still the downside of syslog, and that's still, how should I say, the last point which has to be enhanced, in my opinion, is like the syslog information is very limited compared to what's available in Unified Audit Trail. But I would say it's not mainly the problem of Oracle itself. It's also a bit, syslog itself is limited, and Oracle has quite information in the Unified Audit Trail, and yeah, this is missing, and I agree. This is also the reason why I basically prefer to have a full view, to prefer to use the Unified Audit Trail, and use a self-written wrapper which collects the data from the database and forwarded it to Splunk or something else.
Out of the database.
The full view. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Like having an agent or a job or a script which is regularly accessing the Unified Audit base table, select everything and forward everything to the preferred audit environment. Yeah, to have the full information, because there's no possibility to enhance the information in the syslog currently.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have to stop. Thank you very much to the audience, and thank you very, very much to Stefan for your great speech. We will publish the slides, and if you have other questions, I think it will be possible that you can contact Stefan directly. His information you will find in the slide.